In the world of reality TV, love is often exaggerated and dramatized for millions of viewers. But behind the cameras and scripted smiles, real relationships are fragile, messy, and raw. Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh, stars of TLC's 90 Day Fiancé, were no strangers to attention. Their romance had already survived cultural differences, an age gap, and public scrutiny. Yet what happened in their private lives was even more intense than anything the show could show. This story is about love, yes, but also about sacrifice, betrayal, resilience, and the courage to leave everything familiar. Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh have been struggling with family conflicts for a long time. Sumit's mother made false accusations, claiming Jenny had misbehaved and even assaulted her when Sumit wasn't around. Furious, she told him, "Sumit, if you don't divorce Jenny, you are no longer my son. I can't accept you as my child anymore." Hearing these harsh words devastated Sumit. He realized the only way to escape the constant family turmoil was to leave everything behind. In the end, Jenny and Sumit made a tough decision. They sold all their property, including their house, for $1.8 million. Afterward, they decided to leave India permanently and move to America. They also announced they would no longer be part of 90 Day Fiancé, or TLC. Sumit sold all their possessions, and together with Jenny, they started a new life in America. For a while, Jenny and Sumit believed they had found balance. After years of battling cultural differences and family disapproval, they were finally living together in India, carving out a stable life. Their home was modest but warm, filled with Jenny's laughter and Sumit's quiet devotion. Neighbors often saw them walking hand in hand. Jenny, being foreign, still drew curious glances, but Sumit's protective demeanor silenced most whispers. They had survived many storms before: Sumit's secret marriage, a difficult divorce, and his parents' relentless opposition. Despite all odds, they chose each other. Jenny, older and wiser, believed love could heal wounds. She tried to blend into Indian traditions while cooking, decorating, and being respectful. Sumit, torn between duty to his mother and loyalty to Jenny, constantly reassured her, saying, "We've made it this far. Nothing can break us now." But beneath the surface, tension remained. Sumit's mother, Sana, had never accepted Jenny. To her, Jenny was a foreign threat to tradition, family honor, and the future she imagined for her son. Her disapproval was sharp and public. Family gatherings became battlegrounds. Jenny's every action, from her accent to her attire, was scrutinized. Sumit tried to mediate, but his mother's resentment only grew. Friends warned them, "Peace in this family never lasts." Jenny held on to hope that love could soften hearts, while Sumit felt the weight of his mother's expectations daily. Then, one evening, the storm broke. Sana accused Jenny of misbehavior, claiming she insulted and assaulted her when Sumit wasn't around. Jenny denied it, tears in her eyes, but the accusation hit hard. Jenny was shocked. She had never raised her hand against her mother-in-law. Sumit rushed to her side, saying, "Ma, that's not true. Jenny would never do that." But Sana was unwavering. She repeated her ultimatum, "Sumit, if you don't divorce Jenny, you are no longer my son. I can't accept you as my child anymore." The words cut deeper than any blade. Sumit was torn between family and love, tradition and rebellion. Jenny cried, trying to defend herself. "I've done everything to be respectful. I've tried to fit in. Why would you say this about me?" Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The house grew tense. Relatives avoided eye contact. Some sympathized quietly, but none dared challenge the matriarch. In Indian families, a mother's word often carries the weight of law, and Sumit knew it. That night, Sumit sat alone, replaying his mother's ultimatum. Jenny lay awake, exhausted from years of rejection and humiliation. This accusation was different. It threatened her character and placed Sumit in an impossible position. The next morning, the feud escalated. Sana repeated her demand in front of the extended family: "Divorce Jenny or lose her son." Sumit held Jenny's hands, his voice trembling. "I don't know how much longer I can take this." Jenny, despite tears, squeezed his hand and said, "Then maybe it's time we stop trying to please everyone. Maybe it's time we choose us. The ultimatum had been delivered. The storm had arrived. For Jenny and Sumit, the path forward meant sacrifice, heartbreak, and a life-changing decision. The ultimatum haunted Sumit. His mother's words shook his identity. For days, he walked in silence, shoulders heavy, eyes distant. Jenny noticed the change immediately. He was no longer the man who fought boldly for their love. Instead, he seemed trapped in guilt and fear. Every call from his family tightened the chains. Friends warned that defying his mother could mean permanent exile from the family circle. Being disowned was not just emotional, it was social. It meant losing respect, losing community, and losing the roots that defined him. Jenny tried to comfort Sumit late at night. She whispered, "We survived worse. We'll survive this too." But Sumit's silence spoke louder than words. He was breaking. One evening, he sat alone in their living room, staring at the walls that had once felt like home. His mind replayed every sacrifice Jenny had made, leaving her country, enduring humiliation, facing rejection, and now being accused of something she hadn't done. He clenched his fists, torn between rage and despair. "Why does love have to cost so much?" he muttered. Jenny joined him, her eyes swollen from crying. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Sumit, I can't watch you suffer like this. If leaving me will bring you peace," her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "Then I'll let you go." The words shattered him. He turned to her, pale. "Don't say that. You're the only reason I've fought this long. But I don't know how much more I can take. I feel like I'm losing myself." It was the first time Jenny saw him truly defeated. The man who had once stood against tradition, society, and even his own family was now crumbling under the weight of his mother's ultimatum. That night, Sumit lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He realized that no matter what he chose, he would lose something precious. If he stayed with Jenny, he would lose his family. If he left Jenny, he would lose himself. The breaking point had arrived. In that fragile silence, Sumit knew the next decision he made would define the rest of his life. In the aftermath of Sanaa's ultimatum, Jenny found herself at the edge of despair. The accusations had wounded her, but what hurt most was watching Sumit crumble under his mother's words. She knew the choice before him was unbearable, yet Jenny did not lash out. She did not scream or demand. She chose silence, an act of strength few recognized. Behind closed doors, she cried quietly, but in front of Sumit, she held her composure. She understood that if she fell apart, he would collapse entirely. Jenny had always been the outsider. From the moment she arrived in India, she had been judged by neighbors, relatives, and strangers who whispered about her age and nationality. She endured it all with dignity. Now, faced with false accusations and the threat of losing her husband to family pressure, she drew on that same resilience. She moved through the house with deliberate calm, cooking meals, tidying rooms, and keeping a sense of normalcy. Her actions were not denial, they were survival. She wanted Sumit to see that their love was still a safe place, even as the world outside turned hostile. At night, when Sumit's anxiety consumed him, Jenny would sit beside him, her hand resting on his. "We've faced storms before," she whispered. "This one will pass too." Her voice carried no anger, only quiet determination. But inside, Jenny wrestled with her own pain. She replayed the accusations, wondering how anyone could believe such lies. She thought of the sacrifices she had made, leaving her family in America, enduring uncertainty, fighting for a love constantly questioned. Was it all for nothing? Despite the doubts, Jenny refused to let bitterness consume her. She reminded herself of the love that had brought her to India, the bond that had carried her through humiliation and rejection. That love was worth protecting, even if it meant standing silently against the storm. Her strength did not come from loud defiance. It came from quiet endurance. She knew she needed to be steady, to be the anchor when Sumit's world was falling apart. Jenny bore the weight of the feud with grace, even as her heart ached. Outsiders saw her as fragile, but in truth, she was the strongest of them all. Her silence was not weakness, it was resilience. And it was that silent strength that would carry both her and Sumit through the darkest chapter of their lives. The accusations had already shaken their fragile peace. But what followed was worse. The feud, once confined to their home, began to spill into the wider community. Relatives whispered, neighbors speculated, and soon the story of Jenny's alleged misbehavior spread like wildfire. In Indian society, family disputes rarely remain private. Gossip travels fast, and reputations are fragile. Jenny found herself the subject of hushed conversations in markets and temples. Women glanced at her with suspicion. Men shook their heads in disapproval. The false accusation took on a life of its own, twisting into exaggerated tales that painted her as disrespectful, even dangerous. Sumit felt the weight of the community's judgment pressing down on him. Friends who had once supported him now urged caution. Your mother wouldn't lie, one said. Think carefully. Sumit family is everything. Each word was another dagger in his heart. Inside their home, the atmosphere grew unbearable. Phone calls from relatives became daily confrontations. His mother's voice, sharp and unyielding, echoed through the receiver. Divorce her, or you are no longer my son. His father, though quieter, stood firmly by her side. The message was clear. Jenny was unwelcome, and Sumit's loyalty was being tested. Jenny endured the humiliation with quiet strength. She avoided public gatherings, staying indoors, but even in her home, she felt the sting of rejection. Every knock at the door could bring another confrontation, another reminder that she did not belong. The emotional toll was immense. Sumit began to withdraw, his laughter fading, his energy drained. Jenny noticed the change and tried to keep their spirits alive, cooking his favorite meals, playing old songs they had danced to, but the shadow of the feud loomed too large. One evening, after another heated phone call with his mother, Sumit broke down. He buried his face in his hands, his voice trembling. I can't take this anymore. They'll never accept us. No matter what we do, it will never be enough. Jenny sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. Then maybe it's time we stop fighting for their approval, she whispered. Maybe it's time we fight for ourselves. Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The feud had escalated beyond repair. The family's ultimatum was no longer just a demand, it was a war. In that war, Jenny and Sumit realized they had only two choices: surrender to tradition or break free and carve out a new life together. The feud had reached its peak. Every day brought new confrontations, accusations, and ultimatums. Jenny and Sumit were exhausted, emotionally drained, spiritually broken, trapped in a cycle of hostility that seemed endless. One evening, after another heated phone call with his mother, Sumit sat in silence, staring at the floor. Jenny placed a cup of tea in front of him, hands trembling. He didn't touch it. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I can't do this anymore, Jenny. I feel like I'm suffocating. Jenny's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She had seen the toll the feud had taken on him. The sleepless nights, the hollow expression, the way his laughter had disappeared. She knew that if they stayed, the conflict would consume them both. That night, they spoke openly, more honestly than ever. Jenny admitted her fears. I've tried to belong here, Sumit. I've tried to be the wife your family wanted, but no matter what I do, it's never enough. And now they're destroying us. Sumit nodded, voice breaking. I love my family, but I love you more. If staying here means losing you or losing myself, maybe it's time we walk away. The words hung heavy. For the first time, they considered the unthinkable. Leaving India, leaving behind the home they had built, and starting over somewhere new. It wasn't easy. India was Sumit's birthplace, his roots, his identity. Jenny had sacrificed everything to move there, believing it would be their forever home. But the constant hostility had poisoned their peace. The only way forward was to escape. Over the next few days, they began to plan quietly. They spoke with real estate agents, arranging the sale of their property. Over the next few days, Jenny and Sumit moved quietly, trying not to attract attention. They spoke with real estate agents, arranged the sale of their property, and prepared to leave behind the life they had built. Every item they touched, every room they cleared, carried memories, some joyful, some painful. Their home had once been a sanctuary, but now it felt like a cage. Selling it was not just practical, it was symbolic. They were letting go of the past to protect their future. The sale of the house for $1.8 million was both relieving and heartbreaking. Relatives whispered rumors as the deal went through, some angry, some envious. But Jenny and Sumit did not look back. Every phone call, every message from Sumit's family reminded them of why they were leaving. The tension, the accusations, and the constant judgment had become unbearable. Packing up their possessions was an emotional ordeal. Each item carried a memory of their life in India. The small gifts from friends, the photos of family gatherings, even the furniture they had carefully arranged together. Jenny carefully wrapped fragile items, her hands shaking slightly. "It's strange," she said quietly to Sumit. "This was our home. And now we're leaving everything behind." Sumit put a hand on her shoulder. "We're not leaving memories, Jenny. We're taking them with us. But we're leaving the pain behind." His voice was soft but steady. As the moving trucks came and went, neighbors noticed the activity. Some looked on with curiosity. Others whispered about why the couple was leaving. Rumors spread quickly, as they always did. But Jenny and Sumit did not respond. They had learned that trying to explain themselves only invited more scrutiny. Silence once again became their shield. The night before their departure, they sat together in the empty house. The walls echoed with the absence of life, and the room seemed smaller without their belongings. Jenny leaned her head on Sumit's shoulder. "Do you think we made the right decision?" she asked softly. Sumit held her close, his eyes scanning the empty rooms one last time. "It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. We have each other. That's all that matters now." Early the next morning, they left India. The airport was crowded, but they moved with purpose, keeping their distance from curious onlookers. Jenny clutched her passport tightly, a symbol of both her departure and her new beginning. Sumit walked beside her, tense but resolute. For years, he had struggled with duty, tradition, and family expectations. But as they walked toward the gate, it felt like a weight had lifted from his shoulders. Their flight to America was quiet. Jenny stared out the window as the plane ascended, leaving behind the land that had been both home and battlefield. Sumit held her hand, squeezing it gently. "We're really doing this," he said. "No turning back." Landing in America, everything felt different. The air was familiar to Jenny, yet strange to Sumit. They were surrounded by a new culture, a new environment, and a chance to start fresh. For the first time in years, they felt free. Free from judgment, free from ultimatums, and free to focus on each other. The first few weeks were filled with both excitement and challenges. They had to find a new home, adjust to a different lifestyle, and rebuild a sense of normalcy. But there was no constant pressure from family, no accusations, no whispers following them wherever they went. Their relationship, once tested beyond limits, could now breathe. Jenny and Sumit began to explore their new surroundings, often walking hand in hand through parks and neighborhoods. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of life that had been denied to them. They laughed more freely, and even small moments, like cooking together in their new kitchen, felt precious. Even as they adjusted, the shadow of the past lingered. Memories of harsh words, whispered rumors, and family conflicts sometimes surfaced, reminding them of what they had endured. But these memories no longer held power over them. They were reminders of resilience, not chains. Jenny would often hold Sumit close during these moments. "We made it through worse," she whispered. "We can handle this too." Gradually, they rebuilt their social lives. They met new neighbors, made friends, and created a small circle of support. For the first time, they were judged not for nationality, age, or tradition, but for who they were, people building a life together. Sumit found a sense of independence he had never known. Away from his mother's shadow, he could make choices freely, without fear or guilt. Jenny, too, rediscovered her confidence. Her sacrifices had been immense, but they had not been in vain. She had helped protect their love and carve out a future that was truly their own. One evening, sitting together on the balcony of their new home, Sumit turned to Jenny. "I never thought leaving India would feel like coming home," he said softly. "But with you, it does." Jenny smiled, squeezing his hand. "We survived everything, Sumit. Now we get to live for ourselves." Even as they embraced this new chapter, They did not forget the struggles they had faced. They carried their lessons forward about resilience, love, and the courage to choose themselves over impossible expectations. Their story was no longer about tradition or family disputes. It was about survival, partnership, and the quiet strength required to walk away from everything familiar for the sake of love. Months later, Jenny and Sumit looked back on their journey with mixed emotions. The heartbreak, the accusations, the isolation, they had endured it all. But now,